himself may have been in prison thousands of miles away, but his presence was felt as never before. For a generation in Britain, not even born when he was jailed, he brought an heroic, moral quality to political activism. In the 1960s and 70s, Britain was at the forefront of the anti-apartheid protest movement outside South Africa. Nelson Mandela was becoming a household name thanks to campaigners like Peter Hain.
Nelson Mandela had this almost mystical impact because of his power, because of his dignity, and that transmitted itself even from his incarceration in those cold cells in Robben Island. He became a legend increasingly, so that you had roads named after him, you had student unions named after him.
Mandela was a self-confessed Anglophile. In the 1960s, when he was on the run, he travelled to London to meet friends and comrades. He'd been educated in a British mission school, where he'd been given the name Nelson. In his autobiography, he wrote, "We were taught and believed that the best ideas were English ideas. The best government was the English government, and the best men were Englishmen."
He thinks the world of Britain, incidentally. I mean, he was very, very pro-Britain. Loved Britain. First question he'd always ask you when you sat down was, "How's the Queen?" Give him our best wishes. He had an interesting love of the British tradition, actually, which you might have thought he would be somewhat disapproving of because of colonialism and everything, but not a bit of it, in fact. He absolutely adored Britain, adored its traditions, its culture, its history.
As rising black unrest within South Africa was met with ever-increasing government violence, Britain under Margaret Thatcher resisted international pressure for comprehensive sanctions to be imposed. She branded the ANC a terrorist organisation and preferred to urge reform through so-called constructive engagement with the South African regime.
Sanctions do not work. They never have worked. You start on that road, you'll add to the situation in South Africa chaos, unemployment, poverty, starvation.
What the violence did achieve was to make foreign companies involved in South Africa think twice about their investments. Their calculations turned out to be a more potent weapon than the consumer boycott of South African products, such as apples.
I was very adamantly against agricultural sanctions because they just put a lot of poor people out of work. But the market sanctions did have an effect. It was impossible to import enough capital to help South Africa expand its economy.
Despite past differences with its governments, Nelson Mandela never lost his love for Britain, and in 1996 was treated with far more enthusiasm than the normal state visitor. He visited these shores many times subsequently, but his appearance that year in Trafalgar Square, so often the scene of anti-apartheid demonstrations in the past, was a poignant moment for all who saw it. Here was a leader who had an affinity with this country and who inspired its people.
I love each and every one of you. I would like to put each and every one of you in my pocket and to return with you to South Africa.